Hey guys, welcome to the show. This is your host, Suzanne.
Bum 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 positively Susan positively Susan bum 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 positively Suzanne.
All right, guys. So I am excited. Of course, I'm excited. I'm always excited. I try to be excited about all my episodes. But this episode, I was going to talk about something that I love, something that brings me great joy and great pleasure, and that is reading. So this episode is going to be titled The Art of Reading. I truly believe that reading is an art form. Reading is something that should be sought after, that you should do often as you can, as much as you can. I think it's one of life's greatest pleasures. I mean, there is, for me personally, there's just something about a new book, the touch, the smell, the feel, the pages, how they turn, how they sway. When you open up a book and you're able to be transported to different places, exotic places that you could only dream about, places that you end up visiting one day, and depending on the author and your imagination. And I'll let you know that I have a really good imagination. You could be transported to Paris and see the Eiffel Tower. You can go to Rome and see the cathedrals. You can go to Greece and see the beaches, to London to feel the atmosphere. I mean, every time I'm reading a book by a great author talking about London, I could feel the rain and the dampness. I mean, I love reading. And when I read something and they do justice to the Caribbean, I mean, I'm from Jamaica, so you're writing about Jamaica. You know that you have a pretty tough audience, but the sand between your toes, the crystal clear waters, I mean, the sun beating on your face, I mean, just outstanding. The food, the fruits, I love it. So reading to me opens up an entire world for you. And as a kid growing up in Jamaica, for me, that was everything. Before I set foot on a plane, I was or an airplane, I should say, right? Before I set foot out of Jamaica, I had been to all these places just from reading and using my imagination, and I knew that one day I would travel to these far off places, because in my mind, like, how could I not? How could I not see these places? How could I not go down the canals of Italy? So I knew I was going to see all these places, but in my mind, oh my goodness. And when I was a kid, there was a lot of other kids that were excited about summer and they were excited about playing, but I was excited about how many books that I could read. I know you're probably thinking nerd alert, but you know what? I was excited about the amount of books that I could read for the summer. When I came to America, I remember I was in high school and I found out you could take out 40 books at once. 40 books at once. I was beyond excited. I thought this is like the best life is ever going to be. It couldn't get any better than this. Of course it did, but in my teenage years, getting 40 books out of the library was just amazing. And I continued my passion for the library for a very long time until years later, and I'm so disgusted by it, and it's probably stopped now. I used to go and grab these books and read these books, and then somebody decided, and it wasn't one book, it was several books, to like pick their nose and just wipe it across the pages. And my thing is, I like to curl up with a book. I have a favorite spot. I curl up with my blanket. I have this book. Sometimes I have a cup of tea and I'm drinking, I'm reading, I'm transported. And I might be sitting on that couch, but I'm on a safari in Africa, and I am just, oh, in the wilds of Tanzania. I am doing things, my friend. But anyway, yeah, I'm being transported right now. somebody decided, or several people decided, to clean their nose and wipe it all over the pages. It killed it for me. It was horrific. My love of the library right there. But I started to buy books. And here's the problem with buying books. You keep buying books and buying books. And for somebody who reads as much as I do, um, that's a lot of books. I remember going to Walden Books and Barnes and Nobles, and then there was this place where I lived called Media Place, and you can go and curl up and read a book. And if I read it, I and it was a good book, I had to own that book. And I had so many books. And then, as a kid, like when you move to a different home and you end up losing some of these books. I mean, I have some books with me that I've read over and over because they're just so good, and didn't know where to put them. And my mom was like, okay, we cannot move with this much books. And my other sister ended up being a reader too. So she had a lot of books. And actually, as an adult, as I got older and I would read, I would take all these books with me. So, needless to say, it made some extra weight in my luggage. And I'll talk about that, how I solved that, or how my husband solved that, I should say, a little later on. But I got to the point where I was just giving away books. So I would buy these books and then I would read them, because if I'm driving somewhere in a car and I'm not the one that's driving, I would um be reading. Or if I'm driving and I'm at a stoplight, or I'm stuck in traffic and I pull over for any reason, or I have to wait on something, I would read a book. Anyway, I digress from there. I'm doing a lot things a lot safer now. But I would get to the point that I would just give books away. So I'm like, I come out of the car and I'm done with the book, and I see a random person. I'm like, "Here, would you like a book? I just read. It's a great book. Here you go." I don't need anything. I never wrote my name in it or anything, but I just gave them the book. And like I'm telling you, I take care of my books. So these books looked brand new. Or if I'll go to, when I went on vacation, I would take these books with me and then I would leave them in the hotel room. But then I wondered, like the housekeepers might not be able to keep them because it would look like it's theft. So then these books might be thrown away or whatever. And I mean, I love books. I didn't want them to be thrown away. So I'll say to somebody, "Hey, would you like a book?" I mean, it got crazy. People are like, "Okay, who's this random crazy lady just walking up to me and give me a book?" But yep, that is what I did. I just gave books away. As a little girl in high school, not before I even got to high school, let's say, like, so when I was in elementary school, I was reading books like Judy Blume, and I don't know how old y'all are, but this might be taking you all back. There was these Harlequin romance, and I remember as a little kid too, they had these romance magazines that you could read it. I don't know. I got caught up. I can't even remember what it's called, but I loved it. I did. Oh my goodness. Nancy Drew, there was not a mystery that she came upon that I wasn't a part of. The Hardy Boys, Sweet Valley High. Oh my goodness. Reader's Digest with Archie and Betty and Veronica and Jughead and all those others from Riverdale. Although there's that new Riverdale show that I watched the first couple of episodes. Absolutely nothing like what I read when I was a kid. But anyway, so those were the books of my youth. Those were the books of my elementary years. So, like I said, I loved reading. And as I got older, I discovered other authors, like John Grisham, although I will say his endings always drove me crazy. His endings always left me unsatisfied, and I always felt that he could do something different. I read Sidney Sheldon, which funny turned out like Sidney Sheldon did the I Dream of Jeannie series, or he wrote for that. But I found his book, and his books were thick. And he was a master of creating the atmosphere. I mean, he made you feel as if you were right there. If you were, depending on your proclivities, right? If you were the hero or the villain, whoever you identified with, he made you feel like you were them. Like he was just an absolute master when it came to that. Dan Brown, he transported me to historical places. He wrote the Da Vinci Code. Um, one of the things I also did, though, I always read the book before I watched the movie. And personally, to me, the movie never lived up to the book, but it was great. I mean, for John Grisham, who I mentioned earlier, I read The Firm, The Pelican Brief, all of those. And I watched the movie, and the movies were fantastic. Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington, Julia Roberts, them all my people. But the books were outstanding. outstanding. Like I said, Dan Brown, I read the Da Vinci Code. Like I read all of that before Tom Hanks did such a brilliant job with it. But I had to read the book. Like if I knew, especially if I know that the movie's coming out, I will read the book first. And somebody's like, doesn't that ruin the movie? No. And I'm not watching like point out what they did wrong. I know they take liberties when they write the screenplay because the things in book don't often translate into movies, but I love the books. James Patterson was another person who was so masterful with storylines that kept you guessing till the end. I just would be like, who did this? And sometimes you think you know, and then you don't know. So he was fantastic. And then, I discovered authors like Terry McMillan. I mean, she told stories that I could identify with. And, that was another thing. Like a lot of the authors that I read, the stories I couldn't really identify with, I was transported. But then here, Terry McMillan, she was writing stories that were real, that I know somebody. I have an aunt, a cousin, an aunt, uncle. I mean, it was just, I mean, ridiculous how it touched me. And one of the things that I do is if I find an author that I read, I will search for everything that they have ever written and read it all. And if it's really good, then there's a couple ones that I'll buy from my personal collection and I'll reread them over and over again. I found Maya Angelou and Toni Morrison, who, I mean, their writing touched your soul. Their mastery of the language, it was like poetry. It's like you're crying, but you feel empowered. I read romance novels. I mean, I read romance novels from Danielle Steele and Jackie Collins and Amanda Quick and Susan Elizabeth Phillips. I read those for pleasure, just fun, pure unadulterated fun. I didn't read a book because somebody said that it was popular or because it was like on the New York bestsellers list or something like that. Because a lot of times, sometimes the books that are on those lists, um, I'm just not a fan of. So I read for me the things that brought me joy, things that I understood, things that I loved. And sometimes I'll be honest, I talked about in one of my episodes about people saying that I wasn't black enough. And some of the books that I read, they were like, "Oh my goodness, that's a white people book you're reading," and things like that. But I didn't allow things like that to deter me. I just loved reading. I remember in high school I had to read 1984 by George Orwell, and I honestly thought it was one of the most boring book. It was just beyond boring. And I had to read it in high school, so maybe that's why. But anyway, but I still talk about it to this day. The things from then that seemed so foreign is, whew. Anyway, so sometimes these books that you read as a kid is coming back to haunt you because you could never imagine something like that. Because years later, I'm still remembering George Orwell, 1984. I remember in class I had to read book from Elie Wiesel. He talked about the Holocaust and things that haunt me to this day. They were tough to read. I read books about slavery from, people like Frederick Douglass, and it just made me cry for my ancestors, and it made me want to do more, and to go after my dreams more, because if they did so much with all that was against them, how can I complain, right? So basically, I read whatever I could get my hands on. Malcolm X, I don't remember when I read it, but I read that a long time ago. And I actually the other day found my copy and says I have to read this again. School wasn't an issue. I was a straight A student. I wasn't worried about my grades, but anytime I got a chance to read, that's what I would do. I would read. I remember my parents would be in their room and I would have a book under the covers, with like a little pen light, flashlight, or things like that. And I was told my entire life that you're going to go blind from reading so much. Haha, I'm still 2020, baby. But they would say you can't like read in the dark. I would read by candlelight, by lamplight, out by light, I mean, any opportunity I got to read, I would read. So, even when I was pregnant, I read so many books to my kids in the womb because I wanted them to come out being readers. And I love kids' books. They're so happy, they're so nonsensical sometimes. It just brings you joy. So I'd read to the kids in my womb a lot. And then when they came out and started to read, I would read, read, read. I remember my first daughter, Sarah Jessica, like she was 2 years old. I'm like, okay, why isn't she reading? Like I wanted her to read. And I was ready. I said to my friends, okay, I'm going to buy all the Hooked on Phonics because she should be reading right now. And she's like, okay, Suzanne, calm down. Like the child will read. Anyway, she ended up reading. She learned from that book Biscuit. It's a series about a little dog. And she learned from it and she kept and she continued to read. And then, I was over the moon. And honestly, when she got a little older, she kind of veered off. She didn't really like reading as much. And that was like crushing for a reader like me. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to find books that she will love. So I found, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and she loved it. So she went back into reading, the drama series, the Dear Diary series, the Smile series, like anything I could find that is age appropriate. She's 13 now, like that is age appropriate that she can get into. Things like that. Those are the books that I bought for her because, like I said, I wanted her to love reading, and she did. She fell back in love. And I continue to buy these books. The minute I see one, I get one for her. At first I was going to buy the entire series at once, and a friend of mine, she had said to me, okay, Suzanne, all right, buy one or two book first to see she likes it before you go spend 100 and something dollars, and then she doesn't like the book. So I was excited when she, like rediscovered her love of reading. And I have a 7-year old right now. She's reading, she is doing chapter books. She just started, reading her sister books, her sister's book. And like, I'm just like, I'm over the moon. And I actually last year, or I think it was the year before, we redid um the kids playroom, and there were so many books that we had to donate, just a ton of books, because like we have a massive bookshelf, it's full. So we're like, all right, go through and pick out the books that mean the most to you, and of course that's all of them, but then we donated. And we ended up going to this place, but they said they had a lot. So I just randomly walk up to people and give them books. I get lost in books. I could read for hours nonstop, and when I find a book that's really really good, I don't want to put it down. I would take a day or two or a couple of hours to read a book, and I always wondered how people took that long. It's not that I was a fast reader, but it's like the better the book, the more engrossed I get, and I don't want to put it down. And honestly, not only do I love reading, I like to encourage others to read. So while I'm reading, I'm telling you, somebody else, like, please read. I tried to turn converts, and many of my friends, not all of them, like, they're like, yeah, no. They just think that it's the most boring thing on earth. It's funny, my best friend, who I adore, she doesn't do reading. She tries, but I know she wants to be a reader, but it's funny, but I don't know. It's like either you have it or you don't. I think that reading is a lost art. And trust me, if it's something that I could bring back, I would. I would bring back big stores for people to curl up and read. And clearly, I get it with e-readers and things like that. There's no money in it right now, but like just a big open atmosphere where you can curl up, grab a book, listen to some music, drink some coffee, and just read. But of course, those places are gone. So now I create that experience in my home. So me loving to read now, I love my husband, and my husband knows me very, very well. So he, couple years ago, for one birthday, he had given me this e-reader. It was like before the Kindle, it was like Pan Digital. I think he got it at Best Buy. And I read it. Okay, okay. I mean, I've been through a few, like, cause like sometimes I'll put it in the bag with books and crack the screen and whatever, and I would read. And then end up getting an e-reader. I have the Fire tablet. I have all that. but I felt like I was betraying my books. Like every time I read, and it was like nobody knew, it wasn't even something I was doing, but I just felt like I was being disloyal to books if I read an e-reader. It was just like it just wasn't the same. It was like I couldn't touch the book. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't smell the pages. I couldn't turn the pages. I couldn't, I won't crease my pages. If I have a bookmark or like I put it in there and then just forget where I am. And oh my goodness. And no, I did not highlight my books. I didn't underline my books. My books were things I loved. Anyway, bought me an e-reader, and how I became a fan of the e-reader. So no, it will not replace books, but I will tell you I have learned the benefits of an e-reader. So we were going to Punta Cana one year, and I overpack. Haven't figured out how to pack light yet. So I overpack, and I have an outfit for the morning, the afternoon, the evening, and then dinner just in case we decide to go dancing. And then there's three of us at the time. It was three of us. And I packed a lot of clothes for us, right? And I was like, okay. And I wanted to read these books. So I had all these books. There was a lot of books, big, thick books. And we got to the airport and it was overweight. And I was like, oh my goodness, I cannot. And they charge you so much for the overweight bags. And I'm like, I am not going to do this, like pay all this extra money to carry the books. So I remember taking all these books out of the luggage. And then once they came out, the bag was light. And then putting them in a different bag and using it because you could carry one carry-on and a personal. And luckily, my daughter, the baby, didn't have a carry-on or like a personal. So I was able to put that in and then use that and say that's her personal or her carry-on. And I was like, holy cow. And then my husband was like, well, if you had brought the e-reader, you could have gotten all those books on it. Hey, strike one for the husband, right? Or I should say point one for the husband. Strike one, point one. It's kind of the same thing, right? When you're dealing with husbands. So I was like, holy cow. So I went on vacation, read all the books, left all the books. And that's when I saw the true value of a e-reader. Now, let me tell you something. Having kids kind of mess with your reading schedule because it's like every time I go to the beach and I'm like, I'm going to lay on this chair and watch my kids play in the water while I read. No, I can't read because I'm thinking about my kids. So my eyes are on my kids, so I can't read the books. I put it on. Same thing in the pool. I'm like, she's in the pool. Um, I'm going to read the book. No, again, my eyes are on my kid the whole time. So I can't read the book by the pool. I can't read the book by the beach because I'm watching the kids. And even when the husband's there and it's in there with them, then I get caught up watching them play. And anyway, so I can't. So the only time I could read the book on vacation is if I go to the pool by myself, like the husband's in the room or at the play area or at the restaurants with my daughter, and then I can read because it's the only time like I can say, okay, I can read. Or if I stay in the room just to read, yeah. And on the plane there, yeah, I don't sleep. I read. And then once everybody's in at night sleeping, I read. But needless to say, that was when I loved, I won't say fell in love. I love or I really, really liked the e-reader. So hubby did good. He did great. And when I do love the e-reader, I have the Amazon Fire right now. I get a lot of books and I've discovered that my library's online. So I can get a lot of books from my library. And I read so much books, so much books, so much books, so much books. So I can get it, can download it, I can highlight without messing up the pages. I remember it remembers exactly where I was. So there's a lot of benefits to it. I will give it that. I don't have to have an additional light. It has the light. I can turn it day, night, things like that. And if I remember to charge it, it's good. So nothing against an e-reader. I do think that it is fantastic. And I could bring as many books as I want on vacation in that little e-reader without it weighing down my bag. And I just use my it's in my purse and it's a tiny little thing. So yay. I'm a fan of the e-reader, but I'm telling you, nothing beats the book. Nothing beats holding that book in your hand. It's not the same when you curl up with an e-reader, I'll tell you the very honest truth, but I have learned to deal with it So there's a couple of books that I've read. So I actually 6 years ago I decided to go back to college, and I got my associate's degree. There was a lot of reading involved, so I didn't get to read as much as I would like to. Whenever I could, I'd sneak out and read a book and things like that. But there was just so much to read because at the time I was going to school full time. I was taking care of my dad who was sick. I had two kids. And one was a newborn baby. My husband at the time had surgery, so was taking care of him. So working full time, going to school full time, taking care of the kids, and things like that. That was just it was a lot. So I didn't get as much time to read. And because I was going to school full time and I was working full time, most of my classes had to be taken the evenings and nights. So, I mean, I didn't take any time off. I went to summer school, I went to winter sessions, whatever it is, just because I wanted to do the 2 years for the associate, the 2 years for the bachelor's, and the 2 years for the master's. And I'm happy to report that I'll be graduating this May with dual masters. So I'm very, very excited about that. But it limited my reading ability because I didn't have as much free time to donate, or I should say give to reading. So 2 years of school for the associates, 2 years for the bachelor's, and then another 2 years for the master's. So but last year, there was a couple of books that came on my radar, and there's a couple of books that I read for fun. Just like sometimes I just need something light, a light romance. Read it. I love love stories. I love people fall in love. I love happy endings. So I would read a couple of those. But I read a couple of books last year that I would recommend. So I read "Finding My Voice" by Valerie Jarrett, who was an advisor to President Obama. She worked in the White House during the Obama administration, and I would recommend this book for many reasons. I loved it because it's an autobiography. But she was very honest about who she was, as a child growing up, and her behaviors and things like that. And being a woman, being a powerful woman, getting married, finding out like the marriage not working out, having a child and things like that. And she lists the things that she was good at and the things that she wasn't good at. She also, talked about her path to the White House, working in the private sector, and then realizing she loved the public sector and going to work in the public sector and hiring Michelle Robinson, who turns out turns into Michelle Obama, then working at the White House, her love and respect for the Obamas, and, all the things that she was witness to and things like that. It is a great read. It's a phenomenal read. And, I would encourage you and I would recommend you to read it. I don't want to give it all away because I like sometimes you read somebody gives you a summary of a book and they tell you everything. You're like, okay, were you trying to get me to read it? Because you just told me everything. So great book, like great story about perseverance, about failure, about success, about just so many things. And just humility. Like when I read it, like humble humility. So I encourage you to pick that book up. So it's Finding My Voice by Valerie Jarrett. The other book that I read that I actually really wanted to read was The Path Made Clear by Oprah Winfrey. Now, I have always talked about my purpose, and The Path Made Clear by Oprah Winfrey, it's about finding your purpose. And one of the first things in the book, it said, like, if you open the book, one of the first, if you type in what is my purpose online, what happens, like how many things come up and billions of responses. And I've always wondered, what my purpose is. And if you've listened to any of my shows, you know that I feel like my purpose is aligned with God. My purpose is aligned with doing for others. My purpose is aligned with making this world a better place for others. So, this book I wanted to read because it had quotes and things like that from, yes, some famous people, some celebrities, some thinkers, and some doers, and things like that. But people who have done something, people who have lived through it, people who have failed, people who have had incredible success, incredible failure, and things like that. And of course, there's Oprah. You know how I feel about Oprah. So, her thoughts and her feelings, because she's had failure and things like that. And I thought it was a great book to help you to see that you are not the only person that is on the quest to finding out their purpose. And you shouldn't feel bad if you don't know what your purpose is. But what you should realize that your purpose should bring you joy, and your purpose is exactly what it is. It is your purpose, not your mama, your daddy, your kids, your husband, your wife, your spouse, your partner, anybody. Your purpose is your purpose. And I loved that book. And I quote some of the quotes from the people that are in it, to my kids and things like that, and I take some of them to heart, and I examine it, and I break it down, and I create my own. But all I know is this, and after reading it, one of the things that it highlighted to me, every single person on earth has a purpose. And I think one of the greatest tragedy is if you go through life without finding your purpose, or if you are living somebody else's purpose. So read that book. I think it highlights a couple of things. It will help you on your path to finding your purpose. And then I am at one of my favorite books that I read, and it was Becoming my by Michelle Obama. No, I already mentioned her, and it's intertwined because she and Valerie Jarrett had worked together. So it's funny. I ended up reading a book by actually three ladies who know each other, and I'm aware there's no male recommendation, but these are the three books that touched me the most that I love. So Becoming by Michelle Obama was simply exquisite. Now, I'm sure almost everybody has read it. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to pick it up and get it. And then I actually had my daughter Sarah Jessica read it also when I was done. It was just, and I mean, I get it. Like, people want to read, stories and books by famous people, but it was like a peek inside of a woman that I admire, a woman that to me is just simply outstanding. And she was very honest with who she was, like her struggles, her failures. Um, and yeah, and Barack Obama's in there. Yeah, she was talking about Barack, but I really was reading for Michelle. And she has such a masterful way with words that you get so lost in the book. So there was a chapter, there was a scene in there when she was talking about um a limo pulling up and these guys coming out and having these wild animals, and they were on the lawn playing with these animals, Barack, Michelle, Sasha, and Malia. And like then the wild animals, like whatever, they got loose her for something, and she grabbed one kid and she ran. I think she ran with Malia, and then Barack was still there with Sasha, and they were running around the field. And anyway, like the tiger's guard, it was a cheetah. The cheetah got loose, and she's like, she assumed that Barack was coming with the other kid, but then when she looked back, what she saw was the wild animal chasing her family, and then these people chasing the kids. Chasing the wild animals with like the tranquilizer dart. And I'm telling you, I was at the edge of my seat, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't hear about this. And then she's like, they shot the dart, and the dart missed the cheetah. And then anyway, turns out she was dreaming. But girl, let me tell you, I was reading that. I was at the edge of my seat. My heart was in my throat. And I'm like, even though I know these kids are okay, I was like, wow. And then, okay, so here's the thing which I'm still blown away by, and I told a lot of people when she was talking about Barack Obama's second term. Now, when I read this book, of course, he was no longer president. The presidency had ended, but in the second term, like she has me at the edge of my seat. I'm like, I'm rooting for him, and I'm praying. And I'm like, okay, why am I praying that this man wins? I already know that he won the election. It's done. It's over. But she took us to the point that we were right in that room with them, we were cheering for them. We were hoping, we were praying like that he would win when he already won. So I'm telling you, the fact that she was able to do that is simply outstanding. And and just her relationship with her parents, especially with her brother, that just so close. So becoming exceptional book. Michelle Obama did an exceptional job. And yes, these are by women that I admire. So yeah, maybe it's going to be a little biased, but yeah, hey, there it is. So right now I'm wrapping up. Oh yeah, so let me just remind you the three books that I recommend. I encourage you to pick up "Finding My Voice" by Valerie Jarrett, "The Path Made Clear" by Oprah Winfrey, and then "Becoming My Michelle Obama." Um, right now, I'm wrapping up grad school at the end, so there's a lot of paper and things like that that I have to do. But I am currently reading "We're Gonna Need More Wine" by Gabrielle Union. Now, I've wanted to read that for a long time, and for one reason or the other, I haven't had an opportunity to read it because it's like then there's this class, and then there's this class, and then you get distracted and things like that. But I'm under quarantine and I'm doing work, and I'm hanging out with the kids, homeschooling, all that fun, fantastic stuff. But I had the opportunity, and I am reading it, and I haven't finished reading it yet. But girl, let me tell you, Gabby, she talks about some things that, I mean, all right, honestly, I don't know if I'll be brave enough to talk about, but um just it's really, really good. And one of the things that she talked about was being a child and not having enough information about the female body as a little girl growing up. And she talked about Judy Bloom, who I read as a child, right? Judy Bloom and the things that they taught them. And, she had referenced the fact like today, like teenagers or whatever can still get this information from so many different sources. But can I just tell you, since I was a kid to today, nothing has changed. I don't think there's really any good place that gives women, female information about their bodies, understanding their bodies, accepting their bodies. We're taught to be ashamed of our bodies. It's going to lead you into temptation and things like that. And while I'm not as vocal as Miss Union, I do believe that it's important as parents for us to teach our kids about their bodies, understanding their bodies so that they know how to take care of their bodies and learn that it's not something to be ashamed of. Because when you are ashamed of something, other people are able to come in and do things and because you're ashamed, you are afraid to talk. I always think about kids that are abused and things like that. And one of the things that these predators always say to them, like, it was you, and you tempted me and things like that. And so out of fear, because they think they did something wrong, not understanding their bodies and their feelings that they're feeling, they will hide this, and this predator escapes and keeps doing it over and over again. So I just started reading it. I've only read a couple of chapters. There's one scene in there that, anyway, there's a lot of scene in there, but it's a lot of honesty. And I can't wait to go a little further and dig into it a little deeper. But I am telling you, that is another book. And I typically don't recommend book until I finish it, but that is another book that I think that you should read, just for the sheer honesty and just for the realness, to see that she went through something like that. And it's funny, I do follow her on Instagram right now, but what I will say is this: I applaud the woman that she has become, the woman that consistently speaks her truth, who recognizes who she are and has finally accepted who she is, and is proud of everything about herself, and dares people and tell people you either accept all of me or none of me. And I think we all need to have that moment. So that Gabby moment where we realize that I've always been, and this was a scene from Blackish. I watched Blackish, and it says, I'm dope. Diane had said to this boy, she was trying to pull back duller light so this guy could shine. And remember, there was a scene, she says, I'm dope, and I'll always be dope. Can you handle that? So, Gabby, here's to you. You're dope. You've always been dope. And I hope everyone around you can handle it. Now, I that's a book, like I said, that's a book that I recommend. I'm just doing it now, but even though I haven't finished it, I'd recommended it. So this actual podcast actually took longer than I thought. I was not going to talk that long about reading, but I love reading. I thought it was going to be like a good 15, 20 minutes of reading. But like I said, the art of reading is such a beautiful thing. And while you're home in this quarantine right now, why not pick up a book? Why not read a book? And there's a lot of things that you can do. So if you're like me who have ran out of space to put books, and you've turned into this crazy person that's going around just giving random people books after you're done reading them, um how about I'll recommend it. I know I'm crying too, but how about getting an e-reader? Now, with an e-reader, you can download as many books as you want. There's a lot of free reading apps that you can do. And you can do the libraries, because I do on the library and I get a lot of books, and you get them for, I think they have three different versions. I always do the 21 days, but I always finish them in 1 or 2 days and then I put them back. When I'm done with school this semester, I'm going to have so much free time. So hopefully I'll be able to read again. And actually, I've been reading my Bible a lot during this quarantine. I am doing I think it's Nikki Gumbel. He has Read the Bible in a Year. It's an app, the Bible app, and it's a reading plan. So I'm reading it. So I'm going through and reading that. So I mean, there's a lot of reading happening, and I'm trying to wrap up a lot of classwork right now. So I'm reading a lot of articles. The thing with grad school, you don't have the textbook, but you have a lot of articles and resources to read, and some of them are good, some of them are boring, some of them are PDFs, which is ridiculous. But anyway, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. So let's get back into reading. Let's come out of this quarantine better readers. Let's come out of this quarantine reading, and pick books that you like. Read for you. Don't read for anybody else. Just read. Just read. While the kids are home, get them into reading. Like my daughter, like they want to use the electronic, and during the day they have their class time, but after the class time I say to them, okay, it's reading time, so they have to read. And they are loving it, and then after they read, I'm like, okay, tell me what you read. So read. If I could bring back a whole reading movement, I absolutely will. I did try to get my husband into a read, and I found a few books that he liked. But he's not a reader, but it's okay. E-reader, I will recommend it. Like I said, if you don't have the space for multiple books, if you don't have the time to lug all these books around, the e-reader, you can have as many books as you want on it. There is another thing that I am not there yet. So Audible, right? Books on tape. And as much, and I think it's a great thing, because a lot of times people are driving and they want to listen to a book or things like that, and people don't have the ability, because I know that, like, I have some people that are losing their sight, and all of that. There's a lot of reason, and kudos that that avenue is available, but I'm not there yet. I can't listen to the Audible yet. I need to read myself. So maybe one day, I'll do an episode and talk about, my great love for audibles. But right now, I'm more for the reading. But hey, if Audible works for you, go ahead and use that. If that's how you have to start out to get into it, go ahead and do that. But, like I said, I'm not there yet. But for now, this is a gal that loves reading. So I'm going to encourage you to keep reading. I'm going to encourage you to get the kids reading. I'm going to encourage you to find whatever forms, whether it's a book, whether it's an e-reader, what is that, Audible. Just go ahead, and there's many different free versions. So I thank you for listening as I talk about my love of reading, and I hope that through this podcast you'll discover your love of reading or rediscover your love of reading. Until next time, this is Suzanne saying ta ta.